Branko Marcetic is a staff writer for Jacobin, and he joins us now. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, man.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm getting better at saying your name, so we've been working on it here. So let's go ahead and put this latest piece up on the screen, which is thoroughly reported and I think really significant and important. The headline here is "The State of Ukrainian Democracy is Not Strong." Subhead is "1 year after Russia's invasion, Ukraine is backsliding away from democratic freedoms and liberal pluralism." Let me just read another piece here. You write, Branko, "While authoritarianism is nothing new in the country being Ukraine, it is severely worsened in the wake of the invasion, which has seen a centralization of power by Zelensky's government and a crackdown on dissidents and all things, quote, pro-Russian. A lack of Western media and public attention, coupled with U.S. and European policies actively exacerbating it, are helping to fuel the problem." So give us the outlines of what you found here.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, authoritarianism in Ukraine is not a new thing. I mean, even under Zelensky in 2019, Ukraine has been ranked lower than Hungary by Freedom House in terms of its democratic credentials. And it's actually gotten lower by some measures under Zelensky. He started cracking down on opposition parties and the like as his popularity started plummeting, towards 2021 or so. But it's really ratcheted up since the start of the war, which to some extent is understandable. I mean, I think any country, you look at wartime, you tend to see a curtailment of freedoms and civil liberties and so on and so forth. But I mean, just to say that it happens and it's an organic outcome of a country being attacked does not mean that it's okay. And I think if we really take these ideas about defending Ukrainian democracy seriously, I think it's something that we have to pay attention to. So, what we've seen in Ukraine is dissidents, not just people on the left, but all kinds of anti-war voices, all kinds of voices that are, taking a different line towards this conflict than, say, the Ukrainian authorities would like, who, talk about the fact that this was a civil war before it was a invasion by Russia, and so on and so forth. They've been rounded up, arrested. There's been allegations of torture. Zelensky has basically eliminated all kinds of opposition media. He's centralized all the TV networks almost under one government platform. There was a law passed recently that he signed into law in, I think, December, that basically gave the Ukrainian government under Zelensky wide latitude to basically censor media that was inconvenient in some way. You've had a crackdown on sort of things that are perceived as pro-Russian or parts of Russian culture, which is very significant because that was already one part of the grievance that led to civil strife within Ukraine even before this invasion. So you've had raids and so on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church around the country, monasteries and churches and the like. You've had book banning, the banning of speaking Russian, and this is a country where a lot of people spoke Russian before the war and still do. I mean, some people have definitely voluntarily decide to abandon Russian as a sort of show of patriotism, but there's still people who speak Russian and consider Russian cultural heritage pretty central to their lives. You've had a lot of people being harassed and the like by Ukraine's security service, the SBU. You've had this proliferation of blacklists, private blacklists, which basically lists people who are meant to be traitors and the like. And then, they sometimes list their addresses, their phone numbers, so on and so forth, identifying details. Often the evidence is flimsy to non-existent. You have the prosecution of collaborators. And those collaborators, again, it's a very elastically defined term. In some cases, it's just people who have voiced opinions that are not any longer considered, appropriate. I've already mentioned, mentioning civil war, but also you might add to that just people who happen to work trying to survive under Russian occupation, who take on positions, say running a hospital or fixing rail lines and so on and so forth. And then when those areas have been liberated, they have been charged as collaborators for doing work under those occupiers. So there's a broad range of stuff, but overall, it paints a pretty grim picture for Ukrainian democracy and this kind of liberal pluralism, which I think we in the West see as kind of pretty natural to any sort of liberal democracy, but it's slowly, or in this case, rapidly disappearing in Ukraine.
So why does that matter then for the end state of like whatever that this might look like, and what does it pose as a problem, if any, for the West in trying to deliver a peace for this conflict?
I mean, one problem, as I mentioned, there was the conflict between rival or dueling visions of what the country is. Is there a single Ukrainian identity that comes under, say, people? Everyone speaks Ukrainian. Everyone has this kind of culture. Versus this is a pluralistic society where you have people speaking multiple languages, where people you can have people existing within Ukraine while having some sort of ties to Russian heritage. That was an issue that was alive before the war, and it was the product of a lot of conflict within the country. I mean, that's part of the reason why there's been this war on the Donbass for the last 9 years. And so if the idea is that it's just gonna you're gonna solve that problem by just basically using force or using government power to kind of stamp out all this, I think that's going to cause problems long term. However much people may be unified now, naturally, as they kind of resist the Russian invasion, I think it's a little naive to think that's going to hold. And I mean, in terms of what the end game looks like, I mean, some people might say, well, this is only temporary. This is just during wartime. But again, I mean, these trends were happening with Zelensky beforehand. It wasn't just Zelensky, of course. I mean, the previous president before him, Poroshenko, he was also known for some authoritarian measures. So I would love to say that this is just going to be a temporary thing, but I fear that this is going to be a trend that if and when this war finally ends, which hopefully it does, it really poses some real challenges to having a proper democracy in Ukraine.
I think it also speaks to the Disney version of this war that has been sold to the American public, where it's portrayed as this really clear-cut war over values with liberal democracy Ukraine on one side and authoritarian Putin on the other side. And what you're showing here is that the reality at best is a lot more complex than what is being portrayed in the Western media and what is being sold to the American public as well. I'd love for people who don't understand to just help situate Zelensky on a political spectrum, help situate his allies on a political spectrum, prior to the war, the dissent against him. Like, give us a sense of where the political dividing lines are and were in Ukraine.
Well, I think Zelensky now is portrayed as this kind of Churchillian figure. He's this guy who's defending Ukrainian democracy. He's helping it to survive and possibly even thrive. And as you said, this whole war is about a battle between democracy and authoritarianism. I mean, that's not really quite the case. I mean, first of all, Zelensky, as I said, he began centralizing power before this happened. He actually his leading parliamentary opposition, the pro-Russian Opposition for Life bloc, they had 10% of seats in parliament. After Zelensky's popularity started falling down, they actually ended up being sort of neck and neck with him in the polls. And not just that, but actually one of their candidates beat one of Zelensky's own party's candidates, the Seven of the People Party. They beat this candidate in Zelensky's own hometown, which was a bit of one of those bellwether elections. So they were definitely an electoral threat, leading into elections in 2023. And Zelensky sanctioned its leader. He closed its leader's opposition, his media outlets, which is a pretty extreme thing to do. It was actually condemned by the EU at the time. Interestingly, it was kind of cheered on by US officials at the time, but there you go. And in terms of his politics, I mean, besides the kind of centralization of power, which you can sort of read as maybe act of desperation from a politician who has lost some of the shine that he had when he first came in. Zelensky's and his party are pretty neoliberal. I mean, one of the big things that they put forward, and they actually managed to pass during the pandemic in 2020, was to start selling off Ukrainian farmland, which is, of course, some of the richest agricultural land in the world. And there was a law from the time of independence that banned the sale of farmland to private hands, which Zelensky opened up finally. And by the way, he opened it up at the urging of the EU and the IMF, these institutions that are meant to be sort of, supposedly guaranteeing Ukraine's sovereignty.
Right.
I mean, even you can find a piece from the Atlantic Council, interestingly, back in I think 2020, 2021, where they talk about how Zelensky came into power as this kind of liberal figure, but actually him and his party's record on LGBTQ issues, for instance, has been pretty woeful, which again stands in stark contrast to the kind of image that we've been given of Zelensky.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think that's all well said. I really encourage people to read the piece just for a very nuanced and specific and detailed, well-reported view of what is going on the ground there. Branko, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, man.
Cheers, guys.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.